Gumball 3000, it started more than 20 years ago already.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my first question. Did you see it becoming that big at your first rally?
You know, I can't say I did have the, you know, the foresight that it was going to become what it is now. But I think I always had a vision and a plan to create essentially what I have created, you know, really a kind of a popular culture brand, something that for me could combine all the things that I'm into. So, you know, cars, art, music, fashion, sport, sort of essentially Gumball allows me to kind of do a bit of all of that. Yeah, I think, you know, I think my background before starting Gumball kind of combined, it combined several things really that I'm still sort of very passionate about. So sport in general, I love all sport, played lots of football, but also kind of did action sports, so skateboarding, and that culture was very much kind of part of my teenage years. And then I studied fashion design, and from a standpoint of, again, being interested from a kind of a street culture side of things. So, you know, over the years since then, I've been able to, I've been fortunate enough, I've been able to design for Adidas and for Puma and you know, multiple sports brands as a result of kind of what Gumball has brought me, but also my background in that kind of fashion scene. And then in the 1990s, I got very lucky. I got asked to model for different brands, and it gave me some money for the first time. And instead of doing something wise with that money, I used it all to learn how to race cars. So I spent sort of 5 or 6 years in the 1990s as a budding race driver, racing in kind of the lowest categories of the motorsport, and working my way up a little bit to racing for Porsche and for McLaren in different championships. And essentially by the end of the 1990s, I'd got this sort of circle of friends that were obviously in the car world. People that I'd met in the car world as well were some very wealthy people that were the team owners or the sponsors. It gave, both the car world and the fashion world gave me a great kind of experience of traveling the world. And you know, I had that from the age of probably about 18, 19, similar to today, really. I'm on an airplane a couple of times a week, and you know, having had that lifestyle as a kind of a driver and as a model for a while, I really enjoy it, you know, and it's sort of allowed me to explore the world, and essentially Gumball continues to allow me to explore the world. And so when I started Gumball, it was really kind of drawing on the influences from that fashion world experience, from the racing car world, you know, racing car experience, and the sports world.
And the last year it was your 20th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
And you took Gumball to Japan. So it started in London, and the final destination was Tokyo, Japan.
Yeah.
You know, judging by your Instagram, following your Instagram, I saw lots of excitement about that place.
You know, I don't know many people, if they've been to Japan, that haven't fallen in love with it. It's a beautiful country. The culture there, I guess, is I mean, every country's got its own culture, so I can't say it's unique in that sense, but it's a very different culture, and it's very kind of un-westernized to a certain extent, even though it has brands that are recognized throughout the whole world. And I think, you know, there's just something really kind of appealing to me about Japan. And so, you know, when I was sort of planning that 20th anniversary route, you know, for several months or even a year or so leading up to that, when everyone's asking me, where's it going to go? And, you know, I guess the one place that I hadn't been at that point, or the one place I hadn't taken the rally to at that point was Japan, you know, and I thought the sheer sound of starting in London and finishing in Tokyo just sounds incredible.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we had to make it happen.
I saw one interview from 2016, and there you say that you wish to go to Japan.
There you go. I was probably planning it then at that point.
But at that time, did you already know that you're going to be in Japan?
2016, it was probably around the time that I was sort of starting to kind of make those plans. I think, generally we have to work at least 2 years ahead and possibly even 3. I mean, we now have lots of licensing deals and sponsorship agreements, and if a sponsor is going to commit 3 years of their budget to supporting us, they want to know what we're doing for 3 years. So we have to make those sort of slightly 2 to 3 year plans ahead just for that reason alone.
Is there something special stood out to you in Japan, whether it's cultural thing or something related to the automotive industry?
I think a bit of both. I think Japan has got this sort of the allure and the kind of the appeal of its kind of ancient history and its beautiful scenery and Mount Fuji and everything. But it's also obviously, as you mentioned, it's got an incredible car culture. And even that, once I started going there, I started going there probably about sort of early 2000s, first of all. And people would take me to car collections and I'd actually go to see cars that I've never even heard of before, which, considering I'm pretty much a kind of been into cars my whole life and feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about cars, to take me to a collection where there's models of cars I've never even seen before or heard of, lots of Japanese brands or that just really haven't got much recognition outside of Japan. So it's just really fascinating.
Is there any formula which you could apply, while planning the routes?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a formula to it now, but it's a formula that would be hard for anyone to sort of replicate in the sense that I take lots of risks. Going back to the early years of the Gumball, then I never had the ambition or even the desire to become a car rally organizer. I did the first one to bring together a very interesting group of people, my friends that were in all those different industries, to kind of bring them together, to kind of give them an experience that I could sort of show them that I could do something, essentially. And knowing that these were sort of heads of industry or famous, celebrities or fashion designers or musicians, knowing that I could get them together for 5 days, 6 days or so, I just knew that would be creating something interesting just for the sheer fact that it's getting a powerful group of people together. And so when I did that first rally, and we did a little road trip around Europe over 5 days, and it was sort of, like I said, a handful of famous people, that first rally got success in the sense that the British media covered it. And we got covers of magazines, and Esquire magazine and GQ and FHM, they sort of did big features, and MTV covered it and so on. And I guess it was the success of that one that gave birth to it becoming an annual event. Because I guess it was my realization that actually to get this group of interesting and influential people together isn't easy. And to have the ability to get them together once a year for several days is almost the unique quality of what Gumball is, or what my background had at the time. And then Gumball has just sort of now elevated that over the years, because Gumball itself has become sort of the bucket list event for people to do. And so the network and the reach to interesting, influential heads of industries, as we've got that draw. So, Gumball itself has become the vehicle to make me keep doing a car rally. But like I said, I never intended to in the early stage.
This year you're bringing Gumball back to Montenegro. It is your second time.
Yeah.
And first time you were there with the rally in 2017.
Yeah.
So why did you choose, Montenegro again?
Well, I think when we came back last time, we were only there for essentially a lunch stop, a checkpoint on a drive from Dubrovnik to Tirana. And I would have to say that it was, considering on one rally there's sort of between 300 and 400 people, I would have to say that at least 80% of the people, if not more, on that rally had never been to Montenegro before. And it was quite an amazing introduction for them. Obviously, the countryside in general is beautiful. The coastline, Porto Montenegro itself is a kind of unexpected, amazing kind of, little pocket of sort of wealth and yachts and jet set. And I think it was just unexpected. And, I remember that day that we were there having lunch, people didn't want to leave. People wanted to stay there. And so I thought, if we're going to do another route in Europe that we can factor in Montenegro, then, let's make it an overnight stop next time and just be able to sort of enjoy it a little bit more. And so hence this year's route, we decided to do that whole southern coastline of Europe, obviously from Mykonos all the way around to finishing in Ibiza. So it's perfectly located for the third day of the rally and, the second day of the rally, third night of the rally.
And this time you're staying overnight, right? So
staying overnight, yeah.
Definitely there are many places which want to host Gumball rally.
Yeah.
Is there any place where you wanted to bring Gumball to, but you couldn't for some reason? And what was the reason for that?
You know what, there hasn't been at the moment. So, like I said before, there's, going back to your previous question about the sort of, what's the formula to it or whatever, I think my formula is, like I said, there's unique formula about getting people together, the right amazing group of people together. But with the routes, the route every year, I treat it as my way to explore the world. But there's a huge element of risk, as I said. I think after the success of those early years, I think probably I could have then gone forward and done a route around, London to Monaco to whatever with my eyes closed. And it essentially would have lost its appeal for me to organize. It would have been a bit too easy. So, right from the early years, I decided to kind of treat the rally as a real adventure. And so, like you said, last year we did London to Tokyo, and so we used aeroplanes mid-rally to cargo planes to drive the cars onto and then fly to Asia and carry on the route. And so, very strangely, the country that's been the most difficult for us to deal with over the years has been Germany, which is quite bizarre considering it's kind of...
It's an automotive country,
it's an
right?
automotive country, but I think from... the early years of Gumball, we sort of got this reputation, particularly in the UK and the US media, for being kind of like the rock and roll car rally. We have rock stars driving in it, and and it's wild parties and so on, and sort of that got us the attention first of all.
Yeah.
And in the second decade of Gumball, really, we've just kind of eclipsed that early curiosity that we were, and have sort of become now just a large-scale event. And so the last 10 years, different countries actually bid for us to bring the event there.
Yeah.
Because we are a great spectacle, and the whole country's come out and support it. And, actually we're probably adding to their tourism, awareness and bringing some of these big celebrities to some of these countries and highlighting that is great and it's fun.
Yeah.
And, so... We've sort of eclipsed those early years of being an unknown quantity into being something that people now really like and support. And, even mentioning Japan, we went to Japan because the Japanese government wanted us to bring it there because they've got the Olympics next year.
Yeah.
And it was a way of them promoting Japan to a European audience. And so it's great that we're now in that position. So, for example, in 2008, the rally started in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And finished in Beijing at the Olympics. And en route, we flew to Pyongyang, in North Korea.
Yeah.
And put on a friendship music event there. And that was, that was my intention to try and let people know that this isn't a normal car rally. This is kind of a very unique event. There's not much to compare it with, really. There's nothing else out there that does similar to this, really. There's car rallies, but there's nothing that kind of takes the event or puts on music events or so on in countries that you just wouldn't expect. And so, I don't know, I think, I think Pyongyang, North Korea would have been that place that if there was ever a country that would have said, no, you can't do it, it probably would have been there. I think next year, 2020's route, which we just recently announced that we're starting in in Toronto in Canada, and we're finishing in Havana in Cuba. You know, that's another one that's a big challenge. You know, there's lots of embargoes against Cuba. I've been there many times over the last sort of 15 years, and I love the country, and I think it's beautiful. And I think in the sheer fact that we treat the rally just as a global adventure and completely non-political allows us, through the language of celebrity culture and cars and just adventure in general, allows us to take the event into countries that other events can't go to, or even other, you know, sometimes even there's embargoes on citizens going to some of these countries, but through the purpose of the rally, we kind of get special permission, really. So there's no country at the moment that's ever said no to us. Just in this little section here of my office, I've got this 1987 helmet that was Ayrton Senna's. Ayrton Senna is probably the greatest racing driver of all time. Certainly a kind of a true hero to me, and if ever there's an overused term, it's legend, but he is an absolute legend of racing. And so to have the actual helmet he wore for that racing season when he was driving for Lotus, for me is like a holy grail kind of item.
You just mentioned that there are different people participating in this event, such as movie stars, musicians, sometimes royalties and business people. Is there any connection between participants and the type of the cars which they drive?
I think if you're in a financial position to choose what car that you drive, then a car, probably your choice in car would reflect your style and character and personality. You know, are you the sort of guy that wants to drive a flashy yellow supercar, or are you the guy that likes to be a bit more discreet and, you know, or timeless with a classic car or an American car? So absolutely, you know, I think people's characters are reflected in what they drive.
If some person decide to go buy, let's say, classic car from like 50s or something, so is it all about going fast or just going from one point to another? No,
it's about going from A to B, you know. And like I said, it's a road trip with your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your best friend. It's just an adventure together, you know. And I think obviously covering the distance that we do in a week, then people have the question of reliability of bringing an older car. But in saying that, the oldest car we've had on the rally is a 1929 Bentley. A blower Bentley, so that's been incredible, and it didn't break down, and it did the whole trip. But I think quite frequently, I mean, I'd actually say that, let's say of every year's grid of 100 or so cars, I sort of try and have 20 hypercars, the kind of the Paganis and Bugattis and the real supercars that obviously from a spectacle, from a fan's perspective, then there's car fans and kids that would love to just see them. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I try and have sort of 20 vintage cars. So, and when I say vintage, I mean all classic vintage. We tend to have quite a few cars from the 1960s and 70s now.
For this year, really?
Every year.
Oh,
every year. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this year we've sort of, you know, cars that I would say in the last 2 years that fall into that sort of category. So this year we've got 1969 Shelby Mustang. We've got 1972 Ferrari Daytona. 1980s DeLorean, E-Type Jaguars, DB5 Aston Martin. So, you know, interesting cars like that obviously they're not very fast, they're not that reliable, but they're great, you know, beautiful automobiles and a great spectacle for the crowd. And then in between those kind of the classics and the supercars, we obviously have a mixture of sort of luxury cars. So, you know, people who come on the rally in Rolls Royces and Maybach and Bentleys, and then the more traditional sports car, you know, your Porsches and Ferraris and Lamborghinis. But we don't want too many of those. You know, it's important for me that we have the complete mix. And, you know, by it being that sheer mix, it could never be a race anyway, because if you've got a Bugatti Chiron, you know, that does over 200 miles an hour, and you've got a 1960s Ford Mustang that does 65 miles an hour, there's not much of a race in it, you know. So I think by having that diversity, it kind of even shows people that it isn't about getting from A to B fast, it's about just enjoying the experience of it all.
One interview you mentioned that you really like challenges, especially speaking of Gumball.
Yeah.
What was your biggest challenge during the history of event?
I mean, I think every year I'm kind of faced with challenges. I think that's kind of part of being something of an entrepreneur, really, and kind of taking risks in your business. And I think there's two sorts of challenges for me. There's one is that taking the risk as a business and trying to grow your company and continually evolve. And then there's obviously the challenges that I face on actually the logistics of the rally. And lots of those, I bring on those myself, really. By taking the rally to North Korea or to Cuba, then I'm already, the day that I announced that we're doing that, I'm already knowing that I've got a year or two ahead of me of challenges and sort of, and things might not always work out. And Japan last year was a huge challenge because of cultural differences, because of logistic challenges. There were things on the rally last year, like I said, we flew the cars mid-rally from Bologna in Italy and landed in Osaka. One of the things that we had to achieve with the Japanese government was to allow all the cars to enter Japan, get off the planes and load them off the planes, and then carry on driving. Whereas in Japanese customs, the cars have to stay in quarantine for a week. So, if they stay in quarantine for a week, then the rally can't happen. Because they've got to get off the planes and carry on driving that day, And so those sort of challenges are actually challenges against legislation in those countries.
Yeah.
And Japan was difficult. We managed to get the cars out of customs after 12 hours, which, considering it has to be it's usually a 7-day period, that was a great kind of something that we did achieve, but it was still a challenge, and it was still kind of difficult during the rally and everything to kind of make that happen. Not only because of trying to change a bit of legislation and get the government to work with you to kind of make this a special exception, but also the language barrier, the cultural barrier, the kind of the hierarchy of who you're dealing with. It's just non-stop. So, but I think if we didn't challenge ourselves every year, and Gumball wasn't a challenge for me, I don't think we'd still be here after 20 years. I think, it's the fact that it is continually evolving and trying new things that has kept our appeal.
Is there any alumni club for those who participate in Gumball?
Yeah, so since the first year, we had a few years of in the early 2000s where I guess I was a little bit excited by how many people wanted to participate, and so we had about 2 or 3 years where I had 200 cars do the rally each year, and so it was a lot of people to manage and coordinate for the event. But including the numbers that brought in then, we've refined it a little bit since. But since the first rally, over 5,000 people have taken part. So it's a very quite a big exclusive members club now.
Yeah.
And that members club is made up of people that are founders of the big .coms, founders of Facebook and PayPal, and like you said at the start, royalty and heads of industry and celebrities from music, film, fashion, sport. And so it's just an amazing network. And, throughout the year, we probably put on 1 or 2 events every month that are for that alumni group, but all around the world. So, of course, they're not all going to turn up, at one event. So I think just as an example, 2 weeks ago, we did a great weekend of events in Miami. And, it's great because, it doesn't matter if someone did the rally 10 years ago and they haven't done the rally since, they're still part of that club. So it's just nice. And a little bit, we kind of treat it like our Gumball family.
In the beginning of this interview, you mentioned that for many people, Gumball is something on their bucket list. So some of them, they really wish to do it at least once in a life.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like goal.
Yeah.
What is your biggest goal in a life?
Well, that's a good one. I think I've always had so many kind of ambitions and drive to succeed at different things. I think, I think they change over the years. When I was younger, I had goals and ambitions to do well at different sports that I did, and fortunately I achieved lots of those. And then my ambition probably moved when it moved into Gumball after I finished racing cars. Then it was to build a brand. But now I've got 4 children as well, and your kind of goals in life change a little bit. I think my bucket list things, I still have, the kind of things I'd like to do myself, whether it's sort of, go into space or there's still a few things. I haven't spent much time in sort of a jungle. I'd like to do a walk through the jungle, and I haven't in the last 2 decades because I've been so busy. There's some of those personal kind of bucket list things for me, like climbing different mountains. I haven't done yet, so they're on my kind of agenda for the next few years, really. Okay. But I want to do some of those things now and share those experiences by doing them with my children.
And the cars which you have downstairs, are they yours? Or?
Yeah, they're mine.
Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
your
And
collection.
the same thing, I have cars everywhere, wherever I can store cars, or, and in the office here, it's obviously nice to have a few cars on display.
Yeah.
I mean, those 2 cars that are in the garage right now, they've sort of been the ones that I've kept here for a long time, really, just because the Jaguar is a car I kind of, it's a really special car, but it's not something I can drive on the road every day.
Yeah.
And the Lotus I've had for just such a long time, and because it's so small, it fits in the office really nicely. So it's quite special, but again, it's something I'll bring out for car shows, and occasionally I kind of have the urge to drive them quite regularly, but they're just hard work in the city.
Yeah.
So they're just more nice to have, and I can still enjoy them, seeing them every day, even if I'm not driving them every day.
Maximilian, I'm going to ask you a few more short questions.
Okay.
You can answer them just shortly, yes or no, or like in one sentence.
Yeah.
Drift or drag racing?
Definitely drifting.
Okay. Why?
It's just more fun for me. As a driver, the feeling of drifting is a lot greater
More
than
fun, right?
just straight line drag racing.
Jaguar D-Type, is it still a dream car?
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably got two dream cars that I think I can never buy these cars because I think they need to stay mythical to me. But the Porsche 917 that won Le Mans in 1970 and the D-Type from the 1950s, they're the 2 for me that are those dream cars.
Would you like D-Type, which is the very last one, which is 1957, or any of them?
Well, 1955 winning Le Mans probably is probably the one, but any D-Type that's the long nose with the fin on the back, then that's the one I want. Future
of Gumball, is it petrol or electric?
I think it's electric. I think it has to be. I think we're just evolving. The world is evolving, and I think it's a funny thing in the sense that there were car companies out there in 1900 producing battery-powered cars,
yeah.
And we've got 100 years of the combustion engine, and then gone back to battery power. And who knows? We might have 100 years of battery power, and people figure out it's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
There's obviously much talk about landfill of disused batteries over a period of time that would probably be equivalent to a negative impact on the planet. But I think right now, in terms of evolving our technology, I think battery power does interest me, but I'm more interested in how we evolve into flying cars. Drones essentially,
yeah.
that kind of can carry people.
Yeah.
Because I think that must be the next thing that will happen in the next sort of 3 or 4 decades. I think from now, hopefully, is probably the normal method of transportation. Yeah. Even cars now seem a little bit kind of like slightly old-fashioned.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Maximilian, thank you so much for this conversation. It was a big pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.